Thank you, Rick. That was beautiful. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Welcome, and welcome to the people watching us on the interwebs. My daughter calls them the interwebs. So glad to have everyone here with us and also watching. We have Doug Watts will be our speaker this morning, and we have Rick on the piano, and we also have Joy as our special guest musician, which we'll have her with her music up here on the TV. And if you would please turn off your phones or put them on silent, that would be fabulous. Thank you.
Good morning. I am so glad to see each of you here. Thank you for being here. What a wonderful day we have. The sun is shining. It's going to be a beautiful Sunday service today with our music and so forth. And I appreciate those that are watching on the internet. We always enjoy having you visit us, and we welcome you. We appreciate you being with us today. Often, you know, I'm going to try another week here. We'll try to start out a little bit light. It's not about that church down the road, but it's about an 82-year-old woman, and she's getting married for the 4th time. And she's marrying a funeral director. And a reporter finds out about this. He thought, what an interesting story this might make. 82 years old, getting married for the 4th time. So he meets with her and he asks her about it. She said, well, my first marriage was to a banker. And my second marriage was to a circus master. My third marriage was to a minister. And of course, my 4th marriage is to a funeral director. And he said, well, these are so different. How come? And she said, well, 1 for the money, 2 for the show, 3 to get ready, and 4 to go. Janice, the mic on?
Good one. Yeah,
Oh, man. Now is the time in our service for our Bible verse, and often I do a God inspiration or a God moment. And this occurred to me some weeks back when Dr. Wiggins was preaching to us or giving us a message, and she mentioned this, and it piqued my interest. She mentioned Germany bombing London in World War II. And I thought, well, I'll look into that just a little bit because it just piqued my interest. September 7th, 1940, Germany attacked London with bombing. And this went on for 8 months. And the horrible thing about it, most of it occurred at night. 100% of the time, people knew at night someone in London was going to die. 2 million homes were destroyed. 40,000 civilians lost their lives. But you know, it never did do what the Germans thought. It never did deflate the English or the British mood or courage. Matter of fact, their resolve became even more strong. Someone once asked Winston Churchill, how did you give your people so much courage? He said, I didn't. I helped them focus theirs. I want you to know that in today's world, we've had a pandemic that we haven't had in 100 years. I saw yesterday 3 million people have died of COVID. We have fires out in the West, and we have fires in Australia also, as you know. We've had floods and hurricanes, just too many to mention. And in each instance, we show courage. People pick themselves up and show courage. Oftentimes it's through compassion. A neighbor helping a neighbor smiling at a neighbor, someone doing something kind for another person. You see, we cannot give courage, nor can we take it away. Courage is within. And one of the ingredients of courage, great courage, is empathy and compassion for others. Thank you. Now, it's our practice to say our statement of being. You'll find it on the TV screen here. Those at home, you can follow also. Please recite with me. God is all. both invisible and visible. One presence, one mind, one power is all. This one that is all is perfect life, perfect love, and perfect substance. I am the individualized expression of God, and I never want this perfect life, perfect love, and perfect substance. Our special music.
Hello friends at Valley Church.
Hey.
Happy spring.
Okay.
I'm going to do a completely improvised set of songs today. Because why not? So I'm going to just do a meditative thing for you and we'll see what happens. And I'm just going to try to let spirit move through me and hopefully it reaches out of the screen and moves through you.
Thank you, Joy, for your music and your talent. Now is the time in our service where we have our healing meditation. And I invite each of you to take a firm seat, to relax, to release, to take that deep breath of air, breathe in, and breathe out slowly. We can do it again. We breathe in, and breathe out. I was thinking about some of our different prayers, the prayers of petition, supplication, intercession, gratitude, thankfulness. And often we use pronouns, but really we're just communing with the Divine Spirit. Father, Mother, God, thank you for being in us and among us. Thank you that we were created in your image. Thank you for the I am that I am. Thank you, Father, for blessing each of us, even when we might not realize it, recognize it. Thank you for imparting us courage as one of our inherencies, and compassion, empathy, kindness, love. Father, before we go within separately, I need to acknowledge that there are some that are having issues with health or finances, or emotional problems, stress problems, anxiety. Father, be with them. Let them realize that you're in their lives. Let them feel your presence as they go through this life experience. No, we are never alone. Never. Now in this next 90 seconds, I invite you in your own words, in your own thoughts, to go within and go deeper in your own prayer. Beginning now. Thank you, God, for bringing us peace. Peace which surpasses all understanding. Peace in our hearts and our minds. In Christ's nature. Amen. Now is our practice that we say or know our Lord's Prayer. It's on the TV screen if you recite after me or with me. Our Father who is everywhere, your name is sacred, your kingdom is come, your will is throughout the earth, even as it is throughout the universe. You give us our needful bread from day to day, and forgive us our offenses, even as you forgive us into materialism. But you separate us from you, because yours are the kingdom, and the power, and the song, and the praise. From all ages, throughout all ages, sealed in faith, trust, and truth. Amen. God, why am I going through this? Why me, Father? Why am I going through this? Have any of you ever said that to yourselves? I think most of us have. Why am I going through this, God? Why me? And I want to look at this biblically, just for a short while here. Maybe we can glean just something to make us help understand this just a bit. Why am I going through this? And a good place to start will be with Paul, the Apostle Paul. Acts 27. Paul's been in prison for 2 years. He had done nothing wrong. He's been whisked away to Syria, which is a small village on a port. And King Agrippa is there, and he's talking to Governor Festus. Paul said, let me appeal this sentence, let me appeal to Caesar. Well, Festus and the king are talking. They said, you know what, if he hadn't said that, if he hadn't said let me appeal, I'd release him. But Governor Festus said, if you want to appeal to Caesar you shall go. So they put him on a ship with some other prisoners. Well, it was really a coast kind of ship. It was a grain kind of ship, where a trade ship. They wouldn't go out to sea too far. They'd go from port to port. And then they switched ships to another ship. All in all, there were 276 people on board. That's counting the crew and counting Julius, who was a centurion who was in charge of watching Paul. Well, they were sailing, and Paul really has no maritime experience, but all of a sudden, Paul says to the crew, or their captain, he says, I think there's trouble ahead, there's trouble brewing. Of course, no one's really paying attention to him. I think there's trouble brewing. Well, they come upon a hurricane, a typhoon in that part of the world. And it's blowing them so hard that they have to take ropes and wrap around the ship to keep it together. It's a wooden ship. They were so upset they didn't eat for 14 days. God, why is this happening to me? Well, they started the people on board, some of the crew said, we need to kill the prisoners, because if we shipwreck and some get loose, we don't want that. But Julius piped up and said, no, don't do that, because he wanted Paul to live. Well, they hadn't eaten for 14 days, and Paul said, again, without any maritime experience, he said, let's eat what we have, and they did. And the rest they threw overboard after 14 days. of not eating. And the winds were howling. And that storm went on, I guess, for 14 days. You know, I've looked on TV sometimes when a hurricane comes down Florida way or in the Gulf, and you've seen the weather people trying to stand up, haven't you? The wind's blowing against them, and they're barely standing up, and sheets of rain coming at them, and roofs are blowing off in the distance. Well, if I was on that little wood ship, I'd be scared to death. I'm sure they were too. Well, what would happen next? Well, they ran aground. They shipwrecked. Everyone overboard. Those that can swim, swim for land. Those that can't, grab hold of a piece of wood or something to float. And all 276 of them made it to shore. They made it to an island called Malta. Now, let's go through here. Paul's been in prison for 2 years. He's almost been starved to death for 14 days. He's been in a shipwreck, and he's swimming to shore. He's probably on shore now. Seaweed all over him. And when they get there, the Maltese people build a bonfire for him to help warm him up. Wonderful. But what does Paul do? Well, he's a preacher, but, you know, he's a sort of a man's kind of preacher. He can use a chainsaw still, and he can gather wood. So he sees the bonfire going, so he thinks, well, I'll help out. So he reaches to get a piece of wood to put on the bonfire, and of course, what happens? A snake bites him. A poisonous snake. And doesn't just bite and release, it bites and latches on. Well, the Maltese people see this, and they knew that these people were prisoners, a lot of them. And the Maltese people immediately turned to one another and said, he's a murderer. This man's a murderer. Look what's happened to him. Look what's happened to him. He's a murderer. Well, Paul shakes the snake off. It's a poisonous snake. Shakes it into the fire. And some time must have passed, maybe an hour or two. And he didn't die. He didn't get sick. Didn't do anything. And the Maltese people looked at him and said, you know, he must be a god. He must be a god. Now, I want you to notice something here very quick. Did you notice how quick people went from he's a murderer to now he's a god? Well, folks, we can't pay any attention to what people say about us. That's a lesson we can take here. He's a murderer, now he's a god. We can't take what people say about us with a grain of salt. I was reading about, y'all know this person, Demi Lovato. She's a singer, a songwriter, an actress. She's young, 28, 29 years old. She had some heart issues and she had an addiction problem, as so many of the young actresses do, or actors. And she went into an addiction treatment center about a year or so ago. And she got herself clean, and she's got herself feeling good about herself. And she came out, she started reading social media, Facebook or whatever, and she read about herself, and she thought immediately, I need to start using drugs again. You see, we can't pay attention to social media, Facebook, Twitter. I saw the other day, there's one, of course, called Parler now, and there's a new one I didn't even know about called Gab. He's a murderer, and now he's a god. Let's go back to Paul. What's happened to Paul? Why did this happen to me? He was in prison for 2 years, almost starved to death, shipwrecked, swam to shore, got bit by a poisonous snake. Goodness, what happened to this man? What next? Well, he was invited by, called the chief of the island on Malta, the man named Publius. Just a little side thing here. And, you know, a lot of us like to name our children or our grandchildren. We like to give them names, you know, like after biblical characters like David or Samuel or Mark or Mary. Not many people used to pugilist. So if you want to use that one, that one's probably wide open. I want you to know that. Anyway, Paul was eating with Publius, the chief of the island. And I'm just picturing this because the Bible doesn't say this. But he was sitting there having a meal, and all of a sudden he might have heard some cough or a moan from the back room. And he said, "Who is that? Who is that?" And Publius said, "That's my father. He's very ill. Fever and dysentery. He's very ill." So what does Paul do? Paul gets up, goes into the back room, places his hand on him. I don't know if he touched his head, placed his hand on him, prayed, and healed him. God, why did this happen to me? He's in this man's house. He's praying and healing him. And then, what happens next? This small island, the ones that are sick hear about this, and they all gather together and bring the sick to him, and he heals the whole island. Everyone that's sick. God, why did this happen to me? Let me tell you about Malta just a little bit so you'll know something. Malta's 58 miles from the tip of Italy. It's an island. It's 17 miles long, 9 miles wide. It really has no resources. It has no oil or gas. They have to ship that in. Matter of fact, they don't even have any water, drinkable, potable water. They have to ship that in. It has abundant sunshine. They do have that, and a nice temperature. Here's what it does have. It was a British colony until 1979, so it has a good health plan, public health plan. The United States is 37th in our health system. Malta is number 5. Listen to this. Malta is known for tourism, and it's known for its medical tourism. It not only has a good public health system, but it has a good private health system. It has 2 or 3 hospitals where people actually take vacations to get orthopedic surgery, diagnostic exams, and so forth. It's said that in the U.S., a root canal might be $1,200. In Malta, it's $75. Remember when Paul was on the island and he healed that man and then he healed everyone else? I think it's very coincidental that that island is known today for its medical tourism. God, why did this happen to me? Why did this happen to me? One of the movies I really liked, I remember this in 1993. It was a movie called Rudy. Y'all might have known Rudy, a young whippersnapper who was just too small to play college football. He's just too small. He had a lot of gumption about him. And he wanted to play for Notre Dame. But he really didn't have the grades to get there, so he had to go to a small community college. And he befriended a priest. And as the story goes, he eventually got the grades to get in and got accepted at Notre Dame, and it made it the practice team. He could not play the regular football team that was traveling team that playing other collegiate teams. But he made the practice team, and they beat him up real bad there on the practice team. But he got to play in like the last game of the season, about the last 3 seconds or 5 seconds of the game, and he made a tackle. And all of his teammates lifted him on their shoulders, and they carried him off the field. And that's the only time in Notre Dame history that that's ever happened, since 1976. But here's what got me about that whole film, even though it was a wonderful heart-jerking kind of film. Rudy was talking to the priest. And he was sitting there with the father, and he was going, why is this happening to me? Why can't I get in? And the priest said this, he said, I know two things, incontrovertible, or two things I do know. Two facts I do know. One, there is a God, and two, I am not him. I remember that from the movie. Yes, there is a God. Why is this happening to me? If we look in divine science, if we look for the definition of God's will, it is the intent and purpose of inherent creation. Wait a minute, Doug. Let me go through that again. What is God's will? It's the intent and purpose of inherent creation. All right, that sounds too up there for me. We know what the word intent means. We know what the word purpose means. We know what the word inherent means. What is creation? Well, we look that up, and it's God manifestation. And God manifestation is God expressing love. So what is God's will? It's the intent and purpose of God to express love. Why is this happening to me? It's the intent and purpose of God to express love. I think I found something there. I want to tell you a little story. There was a small church down in South Carolina. It's inland about 100 miles. And it was a Sunday service. It was a morning Sunday service, and the pastor they had just finished the music, the opening hymn. And the pastor was coming up, taking his place on the platform, and he looked out and he saw a friend of his, an older man, an older pastor, an elderly man, a retired pastor. And he smiled to himself. He said, Pastor, won't you come up front? And the pastor came up, he stood beside him, he said, please share something appropriate to the congregation before I speak, something appropriate that might be on your heart. And this elderly pastor looked around, he took the congregation in. He noticed, two more 12, 13-year-olds sitting on the front row. And sort of acting up a little bit like they would, sort of giving each other one of those. And the pastor said, about 40 years ago, I had a church. It was on the coast of South Carolina. I really liked to fish. I had a 24-foot boat. I would go out most of the time on Fridays, fish almost every weekend. I really liked that. One particular Friday, I took my son, who was 16 at the time, excellent swimmer. And he had a neighbor boy with him, a 17-year-old boy. And I took him out on the boat. As I was younger then, I took some chances I probably shouldn't have taken. We went out a little bit too far. All of a sudden the winds came up, the sea swelled, and a rogue wave hit us, and it toppled us over. I was managed to call the Coast Guard before we started sinking. Son's an excellent swimmer. And we were in the water, and all we had one life raft, one of those circular life rafts. Only had one. My fault, I should have had more. We weren't wearing a life vest. My son's an excellent swimmer, but I did not know about his 17-year-old friend living down the street. So I threw this one life raft to the 17-year-old boy. And we waited, we treaded water for 15, 20, 30 minutes, and the Coast Guard came, plucked us out of the water. My son never got out of the water, the ocean took him. Excellent swimmer. He could have been a lifeguard. And with that, the pastor just closed and went to his seat. Well, the sermon went on, and the preacher did the sermon, and everyone sang the hymns. And after the service, these two boys that had been sitting there ribbing each other, they originally, when he started talking, they scooted to the front of their seat to hear. And they called the elderly pastor as he was leaving the church. They said, "Pastor, I'm so sorry about your son, but it just doesn't seem real. It just doesn't seem real." And the pastor said, your pastor is that 17-year-old boy. God's intent and purpose is to express love. Please go within with me now. Father, thank you for the music today. Thank you for the courage you give us, the joy you give us, the love you give us. Thank you that we can glean just a little bit about some of these questions that we have, Father. Thank you for your expressions of love. And it is so. Amen.
Amen.
Here is improvisation number 2.
The sun
sun is coming out. The light is upon us. The light is upon us. The sun is coming out. The light is upon us. The light is upon us. The sun is coming out. The light is upon us. The light is upon us. The sun is coming out. Light is upon us. Sun is coming. Light is upon us. Sun is coming. The sun is coming out. Light is upon us. Light is upon us. The sun is coming out. Light is upon us. Light is upon us. The sun is coming out. Light is upon us. Light is upon us. The sun is coming out. Light is upon us. Light is upon us. The sun is coming out. Light is upon us. Light is upon us. The sun is coming out. Light is upon us. Light is upon us. The sun is coming out. Light is upon us. Light is upon us. The sun is coming out. Light is upon us. Light is upon us. The sun is coming out. Light is upon us. Light is upon us. The sun is coming out. Light is upon us. Light is upon us. The sun is coming out. Light is upon us. Light is upon us. The sun is coming out. Light is upon us. Light is upon us. The sun is coming out. Light is upon us. Light is upon us. The sun is coming out. Light is upon us. Light is coming. The sun is coming out. Light is upon us. Light is coming. The sun is coming. Light 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 is coming.
Now's the time in our service when we get to give back some of the gifts that we've been given. If you would, please recite after me the blessings of the gifts. Today, I acknowledge God, omnipresent, as the source of all good, as the source of my good. With this acknowledgement, I accept His will, which is abundance in every aspect of my life. I release all thoughts of lack and limitation, and I am open and receptive to the increased flow of abundance due to right now. I joyfully accept the gifts of life and give freely the special gift that I am. Through me, God omnipresent, blesses and multiplies this gift for all. Thank you, dear God.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Glad to see everybody here this morning, and thank you, Doug, again for the message that I know I needed, so I'll thank you for that. The flowers today are sponsored by Nancy in memory of her mother. Thank you, Nancy. Appreciate that. Next Saturday we're having a work day. We're going to try to have one at least once a month for the next 2 or 3 months to kind of keep things caught up around here instead of try to get it all done in one day. So I'm planning on having from 10 to 1. I know right now the weather is calling for 50% chance of rain. We do live in Virginia. It could snow before next week, I don't know. But as the weekend gets closer, if it's calling for more rain, we'll cancel it and do it for another day. But right now it's scheduled for next Saturday, 10 to 1. We've got yard work to do. We've got inside work to do. We send out a list with the newsletter. Pick your whatever you want to do, and we'll work on it. So the backyard needs a lot of work done on it right now, so we probably might be working out there a lot. We kind of let that go last year, so anyhow, but we'll see how next weekend goes, and we'll take it from there. The other thing is we will be taking down the fence over here. It needed some work, and so the board decided the best thing to do is to take it down, and so we're going to do that, but we're not going to do that this Saturday. We want to, first off, the neighbor's going to put up some more chain link fence, but also Pam wants to be here to help knock it down. So we might do that on a Monday afternoon. So anyhow, that's going to be in the works, but that we'll be taking down the fence over there, so that way we tend to forget about the fence, and we have property behind that needs to be taken care of, and we tend to forget about it until one of us walks back there and there's all these bushes and all these leaves. So that we should solve that problem also. And our neighbors have been very good about, they haven't said anything about it. So, but we walk back there and there's stuff. We say, oh, we forgot to take care of this. So we'll be doing that. And our next big project that we're going to be working on, hopefully in the next year, is our parking lot needs something done to it. So we haven't quite determined what we're going to do. We got some estimates last year, but we'll have to redo that this year because everything, as you know, we just kind of halted everything. So that will be our big project for this year, and then once we determine what we'll do, we'll get some estimates, and then we'll kind of see what we need to do to raise the money to get it done. So I know that's going to make Jerry happy. So anyhow, that will be the project for this year. So we'll work on that. Our windows, I think Ann told me that she talked to them, and they're like, they had originally told us 8 to 10 weeks, and now they're like 6 to 8 weeks more out because they can't get the windows, and then when they get them here, they don't have the help or something. So it'll still be a while before we get them in, but our other old ones are still hanging on, so we'll hope for the best. Also, let's see, Wednesday night reading class, Tuesday night journaling class at 6:30. And if you have any questions about the journaling class, please talk to Pam. If you don't have her number, it's in the directory that we gave out. Also, this year, our board members, Nancy's and my position, are up for re-election. I know last year we kind of put everything on hold, the congregation meetings and everything, because of COVID. So if anybody would like to run for those positions, if not, Nancy and I both have decided that we will stay on for another term, and then we'll see what happens after next year. The congregation meetings, I think we had one last year, but because we're doing the newsletters and I'm trying to keep everybody in touch with what's going on, it's kind of hard to have a congregation meeting when we only have so few members coming, and when we only can have so many people in the church anyhow. So I'm hoping that the newsletters will keep you all up to date as to what's going on, how we spend our money, and if anybody has any questions, feel free to call, because we'll let you know. And we also put the Treasury's report on the bulletin board there after every board meeting, so they're always out there for everybody to look at, so you know where your money has gone to. We don't waste it unnecessarily. So anyhow, also I've been celebrating my birthday for like the last month, and I'm still celebrating. And we now have carrot cake today for dessert. So Pam, when it's over, if you go get it out of the refrigerator, I appreciate it while I do. But thank you, Mr. Piano Bear, for the carrot cake. So when you get to be this old, you keep celebrating all the time. So anyhow, does anybody else have any announcements? Anybody? Good to see you here, Amy Jo. Good to see you this morning. All right, everybody, have a great day. Come next door and have some coffee and carrot cake.
We're going to close our service out like we have been the last 3 or 4 months, and that is, we're going to pray for our country. Just a quick 90 seconds in your own way, in your voice. Please join me now as Rick accompanies us, beginning now. We are not so partisan that we cannot say, God bless America.
God bless America.